Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. I'm here with Stephanie LaFlora. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Stephanie is from Denver, Colorado, and she's CEO of Crown Hunt and Moxie.ai. We'll go into that later. She's a creative entrepreneur who's very passionate about the art of storytelling. So, today we're going to look at why stories are so important for entrepreneurs, what kind of stories need to be told, and of course, how to tell them. Stephanie recently created a group called Founder Fam, which is for entrepreneurs who want to enjoy the journey. And so we'll be talking a little bit about her inspiration for that as well. And great to have you here with us, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited for this conversation.
Amazing, me too. So, Stephanie, before we do get into it, tell us a bit about you personally. What's your kind of background in your story, and how did you come to be so passionate about storytelling?
Yeah, well, storytelling for me really it began a long time ago. I was entering authors competitions as a kid. I wrote my first screenplay at 13. Like, I was just always a really passionate storyteller. I feel like I was born a storyteller. So that was always core. Entrepreneurship, I think, is something that actually came out of that through a natural evolution. I really wanted to be in control of the creative work that I did. And as was working and building my career, I noticed that like so much of the power was outside of the hands of creatives. And so that made me really curious about the business end of things and understanding how you can create something that has value but also produces revenue. And so I kind of evolved into an entrepreneurial career from creative roots.
Mm.
So yeah, it really was a natural evolution for me.
Yeah, and I think it's very important for creatives to have that entrepreneurial streak. We need it, don't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, I feel like there's a creator's struggle that is common. Everyone experiences it. And it's when you want to create something that you have strong vision for, but you got to get the economics together. And
Mhm.
so being able to figure out the business side of things really just enables you to create bigger things and to imagine more nuanced ideas and actually bring them to life.
Oh, definitely, and it also enables us, well, as you said, to just, continue doing what we do best, really, and who doesn't wanna do that, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about your businesses as well, Stephanie. You've got 2 businesses, right?
Yeah, and one really led into the other. I feel like my entire life has been like a really natural evolution, just paying attention to what's inside. My background is actually in tech.
Mhm.
Even though I started as a creative and actually began in publishing, but as my career went on, I ended up in the tech world. I was very curious about it. And when I moved to Denver, because I'm originally from Chicago, I couldn't find
Mm.
anybody to style my hair.
Ah.
And up until that point, I never noticed that getting your hairstyle, finding a stylist was always this word of mouth experience. I also
Mm.
didn't notice how culturally segregated getting your hairstyle was. And
Mm.
so when I moved to Colorado and I worked in Boulder, which has less than 1% Black people, and I was the first Black employee at my tech company, I
Mm.
realized that like not having someone who was Black to ask where do you get your hairstyle meant that I didn't know where to go. And
Mm.
so I that can sound odd or strange maybe to some people who never considered it, but think next time you go to get your hairstyle, look around
Mm.
and see how homogenous the room is.
Mm. Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Right? And it's not just because of neighborhood, it's actually because of skill. And that's what I discovered. So
Mm.
I made appointments around me at, just the salons that were nearby. And when I arrived, they looked at my hair in the lobby. I had an appointment and they were like, I'm sorry, but we cannot style your hair. And I learned that that was because of cosmetology school not actually training people how to style curly and coily hair. And so
Mm.
with my background in tech at that point, just really figuring out how to solve problems in different industries with technology, I
Mm.
saw that immediately as this big opportunity. So that's what led to me creating Crown Hunt because I was on the hunt for my own crown.
Yeah.
And we started off educating hairstylists on how to style curly and coily hair, partnering with the leading curl experts in the industry. And now we're evolving into actually serving consumers and helping them find the resources that they're looking for with hair. So that was like the beginning of things. And in that process of being a new entrepreneur, and being in accelerators and raising funds and being around other entrepreneurs in that space, I realized how powerful storytelling really was,
Mm.
because I had this advantage as an early founder of being able to tell the story of the company really well in a way that would get press. And I wasn't pursuing these things; these were happening. And that's when I realized, like, oh, this is really powerful, even beyond what I thought. And so I created Moxie AI to really help other founders tell their stories just as well, so they can get funding, so that they can attract the right audience and stop the scroll.
Ah, that's really, really fantastic. And you just told your own story really well there, Stephanie. So
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for that. That sounds great. So let's get on to this topic of storytelling. So, well, first of all, why are stories so important for entrepreneurs?
I think stories are important for everyone because they create readiness. I grew up in the church, and
Mhm.
there's a scripture actually in the Bible, and I don't quote scripture all the time, but I just think this is a very relevant point. That says this Jesus, Jesus is doing this thing, he's always talking in kind of parables and things, and it frustrated the disciples. And so the disciples were frustrated, like, why are you always talking in these parables? Like, just basically get to the point. And the
Mm,
like totally non-religious version of this story that I like to tell, like just to see the other side of it, is like going to a therapist or having a coach. They
mm,
never tell you direct answers. They never tell you, this is what I think you should do next. They're always asking you questions. Socrates, same thing, right?
mm,
And they were so frustrated with this in this Bible story. And his response was, I tell stories to create readiness. And I just
mm,
think that's universally true. Like,
mm,
regardless of your faith, that's not even the point.
mm,
It's just that that's what stories really do. And so if you have a product or a service, you're creating
mm.
readiness in others to receive what they've been looking for in your service or in your product, and like in a really empathetic way. Like, that's
Yeah.
a way of explaining why stories matter.
I just love that so much, actually. That's a really refreshing way of looking at it. And I have to say that I have never thought about stories in that way before. But I guess in a way it's bypassing that whole sales process because we grew up with stories, didn't we? And
Hmm.
stories have been around forever. And parents tell their children stories from when they're really tiny. And stories help us make sense of the world, don't they? And
Hmm.
that's always been their job. I mean, I remember even when I was studying Greek literature and the Greek myths and so on, when people knew nothing about the world, but they had to
Hmm.
come up with reasons as to why the weather was a certain way, or
Yeah.
why seasons happened, or why a crop failed, or something like. And it was all stories because otherwise people would just be left with this feeling of just not knowing. So I think that is, I just love the way that you describe that in terms of, readiness. It's a very simple concept, but really nice. I love that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's from the Bible. That's not really from me, but
Oh,
I just
take
think
credit
it's
for it
just so
anyway, hey?
I just think it's so beautiful. Like, it just makes sense to me. And it's what we do, right? We watch these, even when you're growing up and you're a kid, you're watching these stories of people fall in love, and that makes you feel ready to fall in love yourself. Like, it's very
Yeah,
human. It's very human, I think.
yeah, true, true, because in a way it sort of gives you permission to go there, doesn't it? Because it's saying, "Look, there you are. This can be done." I guess
Yes.
that's it really, isn't it?
Well, because once you imagine something, it can be true.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
that creates the opportunity for it to become
Mm.
real, you
Oh,
know?
yeah,
And
totally.
so I think that's what it is, in like a really empathetic way. And it's a different way of looking at it, because it's,
Mm.
especially right now, I think social media, email marketing, everything is just like, "Rah!" Like, it's just like really
Mm.
overwhelming. Even as a person who loves to consume stories, I'm like, whoa, we have like really reached a critical like peak moment in content
Yeah.
creation and consumption. So it's like, how in the world is it possible for you to make anything that someone can connect with that much noise? And I
Mm.
think that that's what it is. You're not looking for, and this is really an aha that I've been having recently.
Mhm.
It's not that you're just looking for who anyone, I want all the followers. Like that just actually really does not matter. It's about the people who are really looking for what you have. Like they already need it. It's
Mm.
about reaching them. So it's not really convincing people. It's
Mm.
really being clear enough in articulating the problem you're solving, who you're solving it for, that
Mm.
people are like, "Oh, that's my exit over there."
Yeah, yeah.
So it's obvious. It's not forced at all. It's like very
Yeah.
gentle, actually. And I'm learning that, because
Mm.
I think even as a marketer and a storyteller, we copy sometimes what we see. We feel like we have to make sure we do what everybody else is doing, or top 3 tips or whatever, all the things that we prescribe to, they're just temporary. Like those
Mm.
tactics work for a very short amount of time until everybody does it and it's exhausting. And then somebody with influence tries something else and it works, and then everybody runs over there to do that. But like at the end of the day, this is human. And I
Yeah,
think I think it's really easy to forget that. And if you can,
definitely.
and the readiness helps you remember, I think, the human element of why someone says yes or clicks or buys.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, really, really good point. So let's get into the how. So how does somebody tell a story, and what's the entry point?
I think you always start with the hook. And it's hard to do that. You have to like from in terms of the creative process, it can be really hard to do that even as a creative. You
Mm.
just have to have certain rules that you create
Mhm.
for what you create, because when you're in the moment, you might forget some of those tactics that just plain work. And starting with the hook is one of those things. If you're going to tell a story of why your product is great or whatever, you want to start with like the crescendo moment. Think about the opening scene of a movie.
Yeah,
There, the person's running down the street already. You don't
yeah,
even know why they're running down the street, but now you want to know. And so you
yes,
stick around to find out. That's how you have to create. That's what scroll stopping looks like. When
yeah.
I must know what's in the next frame.
Yeah, that's funny because when I used to, I used to work with my children on writing stories, and of course it's always a children's instinct to say, I was walking down the street one day and it was quite a nice day, and I saw somebody that I liked and I said hello to. It's like, no, you got to start at that point where you're drowning in the sea and you've got shipwrecked, and something awful is happening. You're just about to get eaten by a shark or whatever it is,
Yep.
because that grabs their attention, doesn't it? So, I mean, in terms of the hook, for people who aren't really familiar, let's just say, with the whole term of like having a hook, how would you describe it then, in terms of what entrepreneurs have to do?
I think that another word for hook would be punchline.
Mm.
So I think a lot of people can relate to that. You start with the punchline. So
Mhm.
if you might, if it's a video, especially if there's a visual. I'm
Mhm.
working with a company right now that is essentially like decentralizing the way that Uber and Instacart are used.
Mhm.
So instead of it being specifically for picking up my groceries or specifically for taking me to the airport, it's just like cars and people with cars and people who need things done, which is
Mm.
really cool.
Yeah.
So if you're doing an ad, you might actually start the ad with a cat in the back seat. You're not gonna start where the person's taking the
Mhm.
animal and da, 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 and what's actually happening in this scene is that their cat is being taken to the vet by this person who was able to do that while they're busy. So,
Mm.
like you start
Mm.
with that in the middle of the action
Yeah.
and you're trying to draw out curiosity.
Yep.
That's like the objective. And again, these things are not easy to do. That's
Mm.
why you need process, because if you don't have the process, especially with how much content we have to create these
Mm.
days, you'll just forget it. And I do that too sometimes. So this is a good reminder for me as well. But that's really, I think, starting with the punchline, starting with the moment,
The action.
the relief, even,
Mm.
or maybe the problem. Actually, the problem. Now that I'm talking, you're starting with that moment where whatever that is a catastrophe in their life that you solve, they're in the middle of that right now. Like that's all
Yeah.
happening right now,
Yeah.
and then the relief.
Yeah. So I think the interesting thing is, I mean, look, we humans love to be entertained, don't we? We're just entertainment-driven missiles in a way, aren't we? And so, unfortunately, if you don't entertain, I come from the media and entertainment industry. That was where I grew up, in big advertising agencies and television companies and so on. So I understand this quite well. That if we are boring, people will just disengage, right? So it's really, the interesting thing about what you're saying is it's really about engaging emotion, isn't it? It's about
Mhm.
that kind of like that feeling, or that kind of like, or it's that feeling, isn't it, that we're trying to get to, isn't it?
It is, and it has to be relatable. And that's why influencers have been able to create an industry in a very, very busy
Mm,
industry where there's a lot of red tape. I mean, advertising, like, please, who would think that millions of just random, normal people, very talented people,
mm.
but not necessarily initially influential people, could disrupt the advertising industry? Like, that is
Yeah,
very hard to do, but it's because of how relatable they were. They were
yeah,
bringing in a different level of human connection that
mm,
brands just weren't perceptive enough to do because their objectives were different.
yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. And I've got 3 daughters who they follow these influencers, and there's this one, I mean, she's quite a famous influencer, but my daughter is always watching her on her phone while she's cooking. It's like, "Oh, this is like your best friend again," you know? And she's like, "No, it's not my best friend, it's Molly May." And I was like, "Okay, okay." But, it to me, to somebody of my age, it just sounds like, oh, they're just talking on and on and on and on. But can you imagine talking on and on and on like that in a way that actually manages to captivate, somebody of my daughter's age? It has a lot of skill that goes into that, right? A lot of talent.
And like it's authentic. That's
Mhm.
the hardest thing for a lot of brands because the
Mm.
game has changed.
Yeah.
Like how you tell the story has changed.
Mm.
Before, so I don't know, maybe pre 2010, let's
Mhm.
just say, the story that was being told is, don't you want to be like this? It was all, I'm aspiring to be something I'm not. And if you can create an ideal, whatever that ideal is, it's a lot of versions of that. But if you
Yeah.
can create an ideal that I want to be like and that I'll crave, you can get me to buy something. Well,
Ah,
that's changed dramatically in the last
yeah.
10 years.
Yeah.
Now it's, if you can show me a mirror where I feel like me, the real me exists and is out there and I'm not alone, then I'll buy it. That is such those are opposing like
Very
perspectives,
different.
right? So brands are struggling because they have always done that way. And that's fundamentally different than this other approach. And honestly, you kind of got to believe it. It's hard to create marketing and branding and tell stories where you're telling people that they are accepted if you haven't accepted yourself. So the truth is, I mean, I like to go psychological with it because I think all of it
Yeah.
is. I think to create a strong, compelling story, your ingredients must include authenticity. And in order to do that, you have to say the things that people are afraid to say, but
Ah,
not for shock, not for, I mean, people do that and it can work, but in the best storytellers, not for shock, not for just disruption, but because you really believe it. And every brand, every culture, every influencer, every individual has some belief that they really believe in from their true authentic place that isn't necessarily popular opinion. And that's a
yeah.
great place to start. It's scary, but it's a great place to start because now all of a sudden, when you're talking about that noisy room, you're the only one that's lit up. because nobody's saying that. And if there's 200 people, 200 potential clients that are looking for someone who gets them like that, you'll probably be okay with 200. And then those 200 will tell the other people they know that also fit in that group. And then that's how you find your core audience, you know? And it's just hard as hell to do that because, especially as startup founders, we're chasing like impossible numbers and impossible timelines. So you just don't feel that's too scary, you know,
Mm,
to take that kind of
mm.
a risk when you got 12 months or you out of funding.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, in terms of your story, Stephanie, what's something that you would say that is not necessarily, popular opinion or not vanilla? So what are you courageous about?
Yeah, I love that question. I love that question. I just recorded a video right before this actually, and it started with I'm not afraid, and I started listing this. So this is a great timing.
Mm,
Um, I am not afraid to be vulnerable. I'm not afraid to be wrong and then fix it in public. I'm also not afraid to say that raising money as a founder sucks. And
mm,
even though I was fortunate enough in 2022 to be one of about 100 female founders, Black female founders, to get venture funding, it
mm,
still sucks, like, even if you figure it out. And so I believe, this is my opinion, and everybody's truth will be different for them, but I believe that looking into other alternatives other than raising money with ventures and stuff like that is is the way to go, because the amount of energy that it takes to raise money, time, hours,
mhm,
stress, just focus on that versus your business, all that stuff, the amount of energy that it takes, you could literally create another business that will be
mm.
sustainable, that would help you fund what you're doing. So I just,
Wow.
and that's just one idea, but like there's so many, you know, like people have amazing skills and talents and all this stuff. And it's like maybe you tap into that other part of you that has been on the shelf that actually could make money, and you do that to raise funds. I just think that bootstrapping and non-dilutive funds are an extremely powerful way to raise money. You don't always have as much money, but you have clarity in your brain,
Mm.
which is invaluable.
And the thing is, you're talking from a place of experience because having actually been through that process, if you were talking about, don't raise funds and just bootstrap your business, and you'd never actually raised funds or you'd never experienced bootstrapping your business as well as raising funds, then you wouldn't be credible, really, would you? So the fact that you have actually done both of those things, that's where the authenticity comes in, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it really comes back to, it's really for creative entrepreneurs, the people
Mm,
who they got into entrepreneurship because they wanted to express some part of them. And it's
mm,
more than just an economic plan. It's a little bit of a soul plan. And I think that when that's the case, venture funding is kind of in opposition to that. It's not that venture funding is bad. It's just that if your goal is that, venture funding is going to really like rub that the wrong way. Like it's just in friction. There's a lot of friction that you'll have
mm.
naturally from those two decisions being made at the same time. And so
Yeah.
I think it's for everyone to evaluate what's for them. But as I experienced that, I felt that. And I've been processing
Mm,
that a lot and trying to put words to it. Because again,
mm.
I can't be the only one that feels this way. And so whoever those other folks are, I'm here too. So that's something I think about.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I actually scaled and sold a brand identity business to a US communications group. So this was I've been through, not it obviously wasn't similar because we weren't raising venture capital. We were basically selling a business that had grown. But, obviously, with a brand identity business, I mean, it's full of creatives. Of course it is, it's a creatively led business, and so there was a lot of designers in that business. And, when we were acquired, by this, US group, it was really well, it was a communications group, so they did have a lot of, agencies in there, but it was very, very money-led. It was really all about the money, and so I experienced that at first hand, and I know exactly what you're talking about because, to be honest, the agendas are different, aren't they?
And they are. And even in a neutral way, like even if you don't want to judge either side, it's
Mm.
not about that. It's just like really about getting clear on what you actually want. Because
Yes.
entrepreneurship is excruciating.
Mm.
People don't talk about it. It's excruciating if you're winning, it's excruciating if you're losing. It just has that factor in it, and I'm not saying it is every day, all day, but there are certain levels of fear that you probably
Mm.
wouldn't feel if you took a traditional route,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so you're exposing yourself to that. For what? It better be a good reason. So
Yes.
for some people, that thing is I'm going to be a multimillionaire and that is the thing. And if that's how you're great, fantastic, that's wonderful. Live that truth. But if
Yes.
that's not the thing that does it for you, if you need to be like, I want to be able to create whatever I want, or have this very specific vision of how I want to change something in the world,
Oh,
whatever that
yeah.
thing is, protect it. Because that's the only reason to pursue this very treacherous path. So if
Oh,
you abandon that, then you're just lost. And
oh, yeah.
so I really just like to encourage entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs to figure out what that thing is that they must protect
Mm.
so that they can build businesses around that and not go, 5 years into the future doing building something you didn't even want. That's just let's not do that.
Yeah, I love that. You definitely you communicate with such clarity, and it just makes so much sense. So tell us about the community that you've created, Stephanie. Love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we actually just kicked it off. It's called Founders Fam.
Mhm.
And really, it's a community of entrepreneurs, mostly startup founders, tech founders, but it's open to any entrepreneurs, small business owners
Mhm.
who are really interested in enjoying the journey. Like,
Mhm.
that's a big part of it for me. So, what I was just talking about figuring out like what is that thing you must protect and creating it around that.
Mhm.
It's a big focus. There's also a big focus on marketing and brand because that's my background and I want to share what
Mhm.
I have with the group. And just getting together. It's a very diverse group from all over the country, could be all over the world. And you can join that on our Instagram.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, well, that sounds really exciting. So, Stephanie, what is your plans for the rest of this year, let's say? Because as we record this, we're at the beginning of 2024. So, what's on the cards for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, my focus this year is really all about community. One of the greatest and really, honestly, a tough lesson that I learned as an early tech startup founder was how valuable community is. And I did
Mhm.
not pay as much attention to that because I was trying to make sure the product worked and I was trying to make sure we had distribution channels and things like that. And there's only so many people. And so, my lesson that I'm trying to share with everybody else is that if
Mm,
you skip building community when you launch, you will not be in the space that your product deserves,
yep.
that your story deserves. It could be all excellent, but because you haven't built this community that's excited about what you are bringing out and also that you've built trust and relationship with, you will not be able to do what you're trying to do. And
Mhm.
so I'm correcting that mistake and I'm building community now. And I'm inviting people to build community with me as well. So as I learn how to build community, I'm sharing what I'm learning with other people who are also trying to build their own unique communities for their businesses. And so that's really my
Oh,
focus.
yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And okay, so I mean, if somebody was to say, okay, I get this. I'm launching a product. In fact, my daughter's launching a lingerie product, which is a sustainable. I mean, I won't go on about it because she'd probably say, don't talk about that. But anyway, so this issue of community, so building a tribe around what you do is very important. So where would people start to do that? How would they do it, Stephanie?
I think the first thing is go find adjacent communities because
Mm,
they're already out there. Whatever your industry is, whatever the problem you're solving. And the way you know if it's the right, when I say adjacent, is if
mm.
their audience is the same audience that would be interested in your product.
Okay.
So find other communities like that because they're already attracting people that would be your customers as well. So you need to go in there and see how are they doing that? How do they talk to each other? What is, what's working? Like go be a student would be my first and that's what I'm doing right now. So I would say go be a student and then start somewhere. It doesn't matter if your community has 2 or 3 people. If y'all are serious about helping each other, that 2 or 3 people will grow to 6 people, will grow to 9 people, and it doesn't matter where you start. Do not despise small beginnings. I always say that it's so true, and just don't. And so start there, and then it'll grow. And you could do that by creating like a Discord. That's what I did, and then I also just created a broadcast channel on Instagram, literally today, and people were already in there, and we're talking about how to raise funds.
Wow, I mean, that's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie. It's been, I have to say, such an inspirational interview. I really have enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you so much. And if people want to get hold of you or they want to find out more about your businesses and your community and so on, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Instagram at Stephanie LaFlora. And my branding company, Moxie AI, is also on Instagram. You can find the communities and everything you're looking for there as well. And if you're a business that's looking to brand or rebrand this year, give us a call. We're at moxieaibrands.com.
Well, it's just been such a pleasure. I really have enjoyed our conversation today, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, look forward to following your progress and keeping in touch.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. This has been a blast.